Now, a million miles away from that, Warren Buffett warned in his annual letter about the big one. Could be a hurricane, cyber attack, earthquake, something mega catastrophic that would shake humanity to its core. So very ominous there from the Oracle of Omaha, as he's known. So, should we be stocking our bomb shelters on the back of that sort of ominous warning there? For tonight's Taking Stock, I'm joined by Shivani Gopal, CEO of The Remarkable Woman, and Scott Phillips, Chief Investment Officer at The Motley Fool. Thank you both for being with us.
Hey, Chris.
No worries.
I feel underdressed, mate, after that last segment.
I know.
I thought it should be in black tie or something.
Well, this is the thing. It's a hell of a thing. I mean,
Yeah, dress up a little, wouldn't you, Scott?
I may have a ruffle skirt underneath the desk.
I thought I was going to see some pink. It's obviously in fashion.
It is, and anything that Jason Momoa does, you must follow.
This is true, this is true. I feel like we should launch straight into talking about the red carpet, but instead we're
speaking of an 88-year-old instead.
We're going to talk about one of the best investors of all time.
Let's do it.
Because he's got some pretty stern words in his latest letter. Scott, what do you think when you read, the annual letter from Berkshire Hathaway and it's telling you, batten down the hatches, it's all going wrong?
Oh, I'd love to make a big deal of this, Chris. I kind of can't, because Buffett for a long time has been saying he's concerned about a particularly large event that he kind of expected to happen. In fact, he's been talking about bioterrorism now for, I want to say, 20 years. And so, of course, it hasn't happened. He hasn't been predicting it necessarily, but he kind of thinks that might be the biggest kind of dislocating impact in terms of mega catastrophes. Now, Berkshire is an insurance company at its very core, and so it spends a whole lot of time thinking about the right price for these kind of things. And frankly, it's been a while, right, since a really kind of Katrina maybe was the last really big one. Yeah. These things go not necessarily in cycles. There's no timing to them, but they're going to kind of happen. Whether it's the big San Francisco earthquake, whether it's another big tsunami or earthquake, hurricane, it's kind of going to happen. I think his point is more to be prepared for it, to expect it, so you're ready when it comes. Which,
I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? He's having this conversation while the skies are blue.
Right.
And I suppose the question then becomes, Shivani, is it a good idea to have one eye on the worst case scenario if you're an investor, or indeed if you've any kind of money manager, including right down to the household?
Yeah, well, it's Finance 101, isn't it? You need to have a good risk mitigation strategy because, of course, you can't just put all your eggs in one basket and think that everything's going to be fine. And when you think about what Warren Buffett is saying and you think, well, how does this apply to me as the everyday person? Think about the fact that 50% of Australians don't have an emergency fund, and that can financially ruin you too. So if your health has a catastrophe, or your infrastructure, your home, for example, has a catastrophe, then that could actually be quite a concerning thing financially for you. I mean, on the surface of it as well, when I read, the oracle of advice from Warren Buffett, I thought, oh goodness, is he watching Armageddon, or is he, getting on the Netflix binge of the new Umbrella Academy, because it's all pretty ominous as well. But I think the other undertone of it was that, with our population growing, there is going to be, bigger and bigger impacts when it comes to, natural disasters due to climate change. And I sort of got the undertone that infrastructure can't really keep up. So, houses can't keep up with flash flooding, for example. Let's think about Sydney with all our high rises that we have. If we have a natural disaster here, can our hospitals keep up? What will happen to our buildings? We all know what's happened in Homebush recently with a very, very new building. So there's some undertones and some lessons there. In terms of practicality, the thing that I took out of it was keep an emergency fund, folks. That's just good 101, finance for any person.
Yeah. I'll take Shivani's one step further too. I think about personal insurances. So you mentioned housing, Shivani. I think, there are so many people, and insurance is one of those things that it seems really expensive until you need it, at which point it seems really, really cheap, right? And so do I want to pay money for income protection insurance? Not really. Health insurance? Not really. House insurance? Not really. Car insurance? No, not really. But I do pay for all those because if the worst comes, I want to know I'm covered. And yes, there's an excess for some of those things. If I can't work, my family needs to be looked after. If I just prank the car, if the house burns down, it's the sort of things I said. They seem expensive at the time because you're paying out money getting nothing in return. That's kind of the nature of insurance. But gee, I'll tell you, nobody who's claimed on insurance is sorry they had the policy in the first place. So for all of our viewers, if there's some very practical advice, it's firstly, have an emergency fund. And something like, depending on who you ask, 1 in 5 Australians couldn't afford a couple $100 to fix the car if it broke down, which is horrible to think about.
Scary thought.
Once you've got that sorted, get your insurances in order. It feels like money going out, not coming back, but you will really thank us for it if it happens.
Before we move on to the next topic, I want to ask about this idea that in Australia we've got the tyranny of distance. But in many ways that's a good thing. But then again, globalisation is such that we're all pretty interwoven, aren't we? Hearing, you know, Berkshire Hathaway talking about potential catastrophe, whether it's in the US or the Northern Hemisphere or whatever, do you think that we in Australia need to be immediately on top of that, or do you think that we can kind of rock back and think, oh, we're way the hell down here, we're okay? What do you think?
Well, I think, again, you know, to use an insurance analogy this time, it would be really unwise for us to do that. We certainly do need to have proper emergency planning, whether it comes from a financial perspective, an infrastructure perspective, a social or political perspective. So those are all incredibly important. And the American population is so large, so if something's going to affect such a huge, you know, behemoth of a country and an economy, obviously that's going to affect us too. And also, you know, so much of our trade is linked as well. So I would say we would certainly need to be concerned, but it's just about smart planning, really. We do need to be looking at, you know, the way forward.
Right. Well, that was. I mean, we had to have that chat, didn't we?
We did.
Simple, get it out of the way.
But now we can move on, because sinking the boot into lazy millennials has become its own sport. But it all went horribly wrong for Muffin Break boss Natalie Brennan over the weekend. In comments that have now been apologised for, Ms Brennan said that she noticed a steep drop-off in the number of people looking for unpaid work. Now, this is people looking for work experience, internships. I'm a bit unsure about whether or not that was in the Muffin Break outlets or if it was in head office, but, you know, I suppose she's obviously been pulled into line pretty quickly, Shivani, on this one. Do you think that she had a point initially, or is this totally off the money entirely?
Look, I think her points are incredibly regrettable, and I had a read of the full interview that was shown on news.com, and I would really caution executives when they go out and they're talking around, you know, groups of people, whether it be millennials, for example. It's never going to work well for you, your image, your engagement, your culture, if you're disparaging a huge group of people. So when Miss Bennett talked about things like, you know, social media really skewing the workplace, you know, environment, creating a sense of entitlement, these are things that business leaders have talked about previously. And on those things, she's on point, and she could, you know, take that further. When she talks about the need for persistence, for people to, you know, continuously call, she gave an example of someone who called every fortnight, you know, relentlessly for over 6 months. That's a great story of persistence in the right context, of course, and that person eventually got a job. When you talk about millennials by and large being lazy because they don't want to take up unpaid work, it's risky, it's regrettable, and it's unadvisable. So I would encourage a little bit of cultural work at Muffin Break to really rectify this. I think it's really important that executives stay in touch with the new laws as well, because actually unpaid work via internship, if it's not vocational, so for example, if you're not doing a marketing degree and your university or your TAFE said, now I'm going to send you over to Muffin Break to go and do 6 months worth of marketing work, if it's not in that context, it's not actually allowed. So that again made me really cringe and go, oh, you know, it's not really the right thing to be. I think there was an underlying message that she was trying to say, I want a spirit of resilience, that's the kind of culture I want in my company. But if you want that, you've got to project that from the outset too. So some licking of wounds is certainly advisable, and bit of cultural work would be the next step, I'd say, as well.
Yeah. Scott, what did you think of the story?
Look, it's funny, you know, we know from the Royal Commission that how you're seen and how you're perceived, as opposed to maybe even what you really honestly think or what you're prepared to say in the media, is a very different thing. The NAB CEO and chair had to walk the plank. The other ones managed to seem contrite enough and were able to keep their jobs. PR 101 is very much about making sure that you're seen to be saying and doing the right things. I think and frankly from Muffin Break, I mean, you've got to figure that the average, I don't know what the average customer base looks like for them, but I don't imagine you can afford to annoy that proportion of your audience, who are frankly probably got the most disposable income outside the retired boomers in the country. You really want to push millennials away, that's not a very good way to do it. I think, look, you know, to Shivani's point, resilience, persistence are important characteristics, important traits. I think you have to be mindful of how you want to get those from the people you're working with, the people who are working for you. It also, to some degree, reminds me a little bit of, frankly, great places to work, or if you want great people to come and work for you, bagging the potential candidates, complaining about their social media use. You kind of think, you know, there's teenagers, early 20s, parents reading these things saying, don't go for a job at Muffin Break. It sounds like a terrible place to work. They're going to whinge about the amount of work you do. They're going to whinge about this. It's like, do you really want to be there? You know, I've worked for organisations now. That's a pretty production line-ish kind of job, right? You've got to be making coffees, cleaning tables, serving customers. You can't afford to be skiving off on social media, for example. On the flip side, if you're in a business where you're trusted by the management to get the job done, you get the job done in a reasonable way. The culture, to Shivani's point, is a positive, inclusive one where people feel like they want to go to work. Their boss cares a little bit about them rather than whinging about their social media use and lack of work ethic. It's kind of not exactly sending the right message. It's not going to be number one in a great place to work anytime soon.
Yeah, I feel like our viewers could rewind about half an hour to hear, Shivani, you talking about the importance of attracting people to your workplace.
Exactly.
It's an important message. Coming full circle a little bit, Lady Gaga on the red carpet there at the Oscars wore a $30 million necklace, which is eerily. This is a bit of a kind of a digression, I suppose, but it's eerily similar to the movie Ocean's 8. And the plot line there, I watched it last night, I have to be quite honest here. But the Tiffany's 128-carat yellow diamond necklace was last seen around the neck of Audrey Hepburn, and now it's around the neck of the Oscar winner. So we just thought this was an interesting story. I mean, how freaked out would you be, for starters, wearing $30 million around your neck? Scott, I mean, you know, you've been in this position, right?
Oh, many times, yeah. The last time I wore a $30 million necklace, let me tell you about that day. That was a heck of it.
Tell us that story,
I don't remember most of the night, put it that way, but the photos look really impressive.
Yeah.
Look, you know, it's an amazing thing. There's glitz and glamour, so there's that element of it. Frankly, we're talking about it, so that works, and I'm sure the jeweller, who I don't know the name of, so I can't name them, we'll give them free publicity.
Right?
Tiffany,
this
there you go.
is the thing, big one.
That's what the PR is about, right? That's why you do it. I've got to say, I can't imagine how many security guards are just out of shop, but I've got to reckon there's at least 2 or 3, right? When you think about $30 million walking around, you can't afford Lady Gaga to go to the ladies and come back without the jewellery, right? So it's on the flip side. So on one hand, glitz and glamour. On the other hand, kind of does get much more ostentatious than that, right? And you've got to think, I don't know what people watching the Oscars are thinking. They're either thinking, wow, that's amazing, or $30 million, do you know what I could do with half of that, or a quarter of that, or, you know, a 100th of that. So it's kind of, Hollywood's got an issue, right? They've got the Me Too stuff going on, the Time's Up stuff. They've got a whole lot of stuff around representation of minorities or of people who are in less positions of power. And then at the same time, they're showcasing this. Now, as I said, I'm not exactly the core audience. Maybe the escapism, the glitz and glamour, maybe that's enough, and maybe they can get away with that. Maybe that's the story. I just look at that and I think, guys, come on. Like, of all the things you're doing right now, are you really going to flaunt a $30 million necklace in the face of people who are watching that from whatever circumstances and saying this is okay? I just struggle to see that.
Symbolic in a $30 million necklace. Shivani, what do you think?
Yeah, so normally I take the deep line, Scott. What are you doing here? We're switching places.
I'm channeling you, Shivani.
This is not okay. So I'm going to go the other way.
Please do.
And for the first time in a long time, I disagree with you. So I think what a chameleon that Lady Gaga is. I mean, think about it. This is the woman who wore meat dresses, you know, and
she's got a poker face,
and
Shivani.
Anything and everything in between. She's a woman who knows how to represent her brand and exactly what she is presenting to the world at that point in time. So previously it was of the misfit, the rebel. I don't care what you think of me. I create my own impression of me, and that's what I'm going to project. Now she's going into A Star Is Born, her first, you know, film, and she's bringing out a necklace that was previously worn by Audrey Hepburn. You know, if there's any personification of A Star Is Born, it's really that, isn't it? So I think there's this cultural deep element to it, and she wanted exactly this. She wanted us to talk about it. So yes, there is a lot of, you know, misrepresentation in Hollywood, and there's a lot of, you know, campaigns that are being run. I think Lady Gaga is very specifically choosing her campaign on this, and that is that she's rising to a different platform and saying, look at me, I'm a star and I'm a chameleon and I can fit in many different places, and I want you to talk about this, and I want you to talk about the beautiful duet that she had as well, so you know, with Bradley Cooper. So I think she's exceptionally talented, and I think it was a bit of a strategic move. Also, could it be the makings of a sequel of Ocean's 8? I mean, could it be that? You know, I'm just saying.
First scene in a movie that's... Yeah.
This is a good point. Look, I really appreciate you guys coming on, because only with you two and only on this show could we go from Warren Buffett to Lady Gaga via millennial bashing.
It's a short hop.
We're a talented bunch, Chris.
I really like it. Shivani, Gopal, CEO of The Remarkable Woman, and Scott Phillips, Chief Investment Officer at The Motley Fool. Much appreciated as always.